There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's UNU-INWEH Science Talk, Researching Silent Casualties, Collaborative, Ethical, and Interdisciplinary Approaches to Conflict-Affected Regions. My name is Lu Ying Wang, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. For those who are new to the Science Talks, our weekly series showcases the exciting research of UNU-INWEH, and I'm pleased to share that all previous science talks are available on demand, and you can watch the full 2025 series on our website and YouTube channels. Today's talk, like all the others, will be recorded and the video will be made available after the session. We'll conclude with an interactive Q&A, and so please share your questions in our chat box. So before we begin, let me just first introduce our speaker, Dr. Pinar Dinc. Sorry. Dr. Dinc is a political scientist specialized in environmental peace and conflict studies, with a particular focus on the interplay between political power, climate and environmental change, ecological degradation, authoritarianism, resistance, and migration. As the Environmental Conflict Nexus Research Fellow at UNU-INWEH, her work focuses on environmental peace building and ecological destruction in conflict zones, exploring how environmental degradation and violent conflicts are deeply interconnected. Dr. Dinc is also Associate Professor in the Department of Political Science and a researcher at the Center for Advanced Middle Eastern Studies at Lund University, where she contributes to the activities of the UNU Hub on water in a changing environment. She holds a PhD in political science from the London School of Economics. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Pinar Dinc to share her talks on research in silent casualties. The floor is yours, Dr. Dinc. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can hear me well, right? Everything okay? You can hear me? Okay,
yes.
Good. Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much for having me in the UNU Science Talk series. It's a real pleasure to be here today. And thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, my name is Pinar Dinc, and I'm a scholar from Turkey, and currently an associate professor of political science at Lund University in Sweden, where I've been based since 2017. And I also work as a researcher at the Center for Advanced Middle Eastern Studies, and more recently I've joined UNU-INWEH as an Environment Conflict Nexus Research Fellow. So over the past 8 years, my research has focused on the intersection of conflict and the environment. And I mainly specialize in environmental peace and conflict studies, with particular attention to how political power, climate, and environmental change, ecological degradation, authoritarianism, resistance, and migration interact. So let me show you this figure that I have made before, which sort of summarizes what I'm mainly working on. So my work primarily examines both state and stateless actors in the Middle East, with Turkey, Syria, and the Kurdistan region of Iraq and Palestine as my main regional focus. In terms of the UN language Sustainable Development Goals, my research contributes most directly to SDG 13, Climate Action, SDG 15, Life on Land, and SDG 16, which is Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. So what I want to do today is to share some reflections on how we as researchers can responsibly engage with conflict-affected regions, especially when the environment becomes a silent casualty. So what is this concept, silent casualty, and why do we think environment is a silent casualty? Well, the term silent casualties was notably used by the United Nations Environment Programme to describe the environment in the context of armed conflict. In a 2016 statement, which I share a caption here, UNEP emphasized that the environment is often the silent casualty of war, damaged not only by direct military actions, but also by scorched earth tactics, toxic pollution, and the long-term collapse of governance systems. Environmental destruction, therefore, can impede humanitarian aid delivery, delay post-war recovery efforts, and contribute to forced migration. Yet, I would say, despite its centrality to human survival and peace building, the environment remains pretty much marginal in conflict discourse, especially in lands inhabited by marginalized groups, those oppressed by ethnicity, indigeneity, or race. Environmental degradation and resistance are often overlooked or criminalized. And this environmental racism, I mean, I just want to emphasize here that I use the concept environmental racism borrowing from Dr. Benjamin Chavez, who coined the term in 1982 to explain how, the unequal attributions of environmental destruction on marginalized communities. So when we think about this environmental destruction and yet, there's not enough focus on this, we also see that states bound by international humanitarian and environmental laws sometimes weaponize environmental destruction against subaltern groups. And when these groups engage in activism, or environmental activism, reforestation attempts, or community governance, their efforts are at times framed through security lenses, with some authorities characterizing these movements or resistance actions as forms of insurgency or extremism. In certain contexts, particularly under authoritarian regimes or in conflict zones, such initiatives may be mischaracterized as insurgent activity, despite their focus on ecological restoration and local empowerment. So this silence around environmental destruction and the environmental resistance of marginalized groups is what I aim to break through my research. And I wanted to structure my talk around three pillars. The first one is collaborative research, how we should break this silence through our research in collaborative in a collaborative research approach. So as it was announced in the introduction, I'm trained as a social scientist. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor degree in IR. Then I have a master's degree in comparative studies in history and society. I have another master's degree, master in research from the LSE on qualitative research methods, and then a PhD degree in political science. And I've always used qualitative data in my research, and I really admire the rich insights we gain from qualitative data through interviews, texts, and lived experiences. So I find it particularly important that meanings and perceptions and narratives evolve over time and space and across different societies. But when I began researching environmental destruction in conflict zones, I faced a major challenge: denial of environmental damage and destruction, often in an intentional way, under the banner of fighting against insurgent groups. So I was thinking, okay, I can see that there is something happening that connects conflict and environment, but it is very difficult to explain this or do research about this by only focusing on qualitative research methods, by only focusing on what the people on the ground are saying, what the texts are revealing, and so on. So in many cases, I was also aware that states deny that any environmental harm has occurred, or they justify it as a necessary part of counterinsurgency operations. And this makes it extremely difficult to document and analyze the environmental consequences of conflict. This led me to collaborate with physical geographers back in 2018, I believe, and especially with people with expertise on remote sensing and geographical information systems, GIS methods. So through my Marie Curie individual fellowship and the project that I was carrying out called FIRE, Fighting Insurgency, Ruining the Environment, I began working very closely with physical geographers, including my long-term academic partner, Lina Eklund, a critical physical geographer who is also one of the research fellows at UNU-INWEH, and she also was among the speakers in the UNU Science Talks before. So together we started combining these local narratives with satellite imagery and conflict data. We identified hotspots where fires and conflict events overlapped, linking hard data, quote unquote, hard data with lived experiences or qualitative data, if you will. This collaboration was not just technical, it was also intellectual and ethical, involving shared design of research, joint authorship, and mutual learning for sure. Collaboration, of course, I mean, I'm here talking about academic collaboration, but it extends beyond academia. It includes civil society organizations, local communities, practitioners, and these actors are not sources of data for researchers, or they shouldn't be. They are co-producers of knowledge. But let me come back to this after talking a bit about the second pillar, which is ethics. So ethical research is often reduced to formal procedures. Review boards, ethical review boards, GDPR compliance, data protection, and these are of course essential, but they're not enough. And I think we need to talk a bit more about the ethical part of research. Ethics is it's not just a checklist that we can, just tick the boxes and get the approval and move on. It should be a continuous process of reflection, of responsibility and responsiveness. Researching outside of Europe or the Anglo-Saxon world brings unique challenges, I would say, particularly in conflict zones. Access to field or to information or to people is often quite restricted, not only by geography, but also by political sensitivities, surveillance, and security risks. Authoritarian contexts may criminalize certain questions or restrict movements, making it dangerous for both us researchers, but also with our research participants and collaborators. And these dilemmas require us to think a bit more carefully about what questions we ask, how we ask them, and who we involve in our research. We must consider the safety of our collaborators, the potential consequences of publishing sensitive findings, and the long-term impact of this research on communities, because sometimes we think that it's okay for that duration of time, but time passes and conditions change and the political context changes. And what we have, the kind of information that we revealed before becomes a sensitive information suddenly. Another challenge is, of course, geographical challenge. Sometimes we're not able to travel to the field that we want to work on. This could be due to security concerns, visa restrictions. It may have to do with the kind of passport that we have or the nationality that we hold, or it could be institutional limitations, right? Because sometimes you get, these areas that are, strictly recommended against traveling, right? So then it means that you're not insured if you go there. You don't have protection from your employer or institution and so on. And of course, I understand this. I understand these ethical challenges, but in these cases, we are also engaging. We're engaging in research that could end up being something that is called a parachute research, and this refers to research conducted remotely or superficially without sustained engagement with local contexts or collaboration with local actors. And it can lead to misinterpretation, ethical oversights, and extractive practices. This is where I think ethics and collaboration intersect quite a lot, because ethical research must be grounded in meaningful partnerships with people on the ground. These could be local scholars, these could be civil society actors on the ground, community leaders, practitioners. everyone who we can collaborate with on the ground could be our collaborators. And these individuals are not merely our access to data. It's not our access to the field. So they're not just sources of data. They are experts in their own right with deep contextual knowledge and lived experience. And therefore, beyond collaborating with local actors, which in understanding how conflict and environment intersects, we really need to be counter-extractive. This means that we must be mindful not to take knowledge, time, or resources from communities without reciprocity, without giving something back. And we must ask ourselves, like, what are we giving back to these communities when we come here, or like when we collaborate with them and get this information, get the data, start publishing, and then we leave? And what do we give back to these societies that we're working on? How are we contributing to these communities that make our research possible, that at times make our careers possible, right? So, and giving back, or this reciprocity, could of course take many forms. It might involve simple co-authoring publications of academic nature or popular science, offering training workshops or mentoring opportunities to people there. It could be civil society experts, or it could be students, children, women, farmers, you name it, or supporting local data collection and analysis capacities, basically capacity building and training sessions. It can also mean translating our findings into local languages, into languages that are being spoken in the areas that we work on, and presenting them in an accessible, jargon-free formats through community meetings, visual materials, and short understandable policy briefs. And another important avenue is, of course, public engagement. We can definitely use our platforms to raise awareness about the hidden environmental and social impacts of conflict through media outreach, through public talks, or collaborations with artists. We can be creative. There's so many ways of doing this. And by doing so, we actually help amplify the voices of those affected and bring attention to issues that are often ignored. And ethical research, of course, also requires institutional support. Universities and funders are also to think more about, to think more about how time matters, how resources matter, and how the type of flexibility that is needed to build and sustain equitable and reciprocal collaborations. This, of course, includes accommodating the realities of partners who may face travel restrictions, limited funding, or political constraints. And finally, we must, in the ethical pillar, we must engage in ongoing reflexivity. This means being aware of our own positionality, our privileges, our biases, and the power dynamics that shape our interactions. It means being attuned to the cultural and political sensitivities of the contexts that we study, and being willing to adapt our methods and assumptions accordingly. In short, I might say that ethical research is not a checklist. It's a continuous, relational, and context-sensitive practice. And it is about building trust, sharing power, and ensuring that our work contributes meaningfully and respectfully to the communities we engage with. And here we can jump to the third aspect, which is again related to collaboration, but it's interdisciplinarity. And I must say that I have been extremely fortunate to work in an environment that fosters interdisciplinary collaboration really so much. I am in a space surrounded with scholars from different faculties, departments, backgrounds, and we come together and we have a space to discuss these issues together. We're given time and space at times, of course, due, sort of limited to funding availability, but we nonetheless have the physical space to at least come together and talk about these things from a broader perspective. And I so far worked with climate scientists, water engineers, sustainability scientists, and geographers, of both human geographers and physical geographers. And these collaborations, these interdisciplinary collaborations, have surely enriched my understanding of the complex realities that I have been focusing on in my research, or we have been focusing on together. But I still think that we need more, even more interdisciplinarity when we work on the environment. Because the realities on the ground, we often realize, and especially in conflict-affected regions, are quite multidimensional. Conflict doesn't just affect politics. It affects humans. It affects non-humans. It affects, soil, air, land, water, other species. It has impacts on people's health, including their mental health. It has an impact on the memories, the culture, the identity, the language, the oral history. And of course, when we also think about environment and conflict, we also have this, the possibility, of course, always of post-conflict. So what happens? Development, reconstruction, justice, transitional justice, and so on. So these elements are often deeply interlinked, and it is really a challenge to talk about all of these issues from a single, or even like just a few disciplinary perspectives. Even when I am lucky enough to work with a quite interdisciplinary team applying different methods, we are still missing out on some aspects. So I may say here that water scarcity, for example, can exacerbate political tensions. Cultural erasure can undermine post-conflict reconciliation. To understand these connections, these interlinks, we need interdisciplinary approaches that allows to connect the dots between these seemingly separate issues. And as I said, despite being involved in different interdisciplinary projects, I still hope to collaborate more with scholars from other fields, especially law and medicine, I would say, and economics. Legal scholars can definitely help us, me in particular, frame environmental harm within justice and accountability frameworks. Medical doctors can assess health impacts of environmental degradation, and economists can help us quantify the cost of ecological loss and the value of sustainable recovery. But of course, interdisciplinary is not just about bringing different, scholars together as well. It also requires some sort of structural support. And this, of course, means we need long-term funding, because 2-year, 3-year projects, by the time we manage to sit down together and understand each other from our separate perspectives, time flies. We have other responsibilities like teaching and other things that I will talk about now. So we really need long-term strategic funding that supports this kind of sustained collaboration, interdisciplinary collaboration. Another thing that it's very unfortunate that we still need to highlight is academic freedoms, of course. We need more and unrestricted academic freedoms to explore unconventional questions and challenge dominant paradigms. And of course, policy engagement. We need to ensure our research is not only rigorous, but also relevant and actionable, which is a challenge, I will accept. And this, of course, means that we need to build a shared language, one that bridges jargon and allows for disciplinary jargon and allows for mutual understanding. And this takes time. This takes a lot of patience, a lot of long discussions to understand what we actually mean. I can give you one example from the concept of ecology. Like in our research, when we sit down together and someone says ecology, a human geographer understands it completely different from a political scientist, and a political scientist understands it completely different from a geographer. So, simple concepts that we keep using in our work and research and activities, and even in our daily language, really has different meanings for different disciplines. And this figuring out a shared language that we can all agree on, or at least understand clearly, is really key. And of course, this requires some sort of willingness to learn from each other as well. It means being open to different epistemologies, different methodologies, and ways of knowing. And ultimately, interdisciplinarity is not just a methodological choice, it's an ethical imperative. It reflects the complexity of the world that we study and the interconnectedness of its challenges. It allows us to produce knowledge that is not only more comprehensive, but also more just. And as I have hinted a bit, this of course brings us to communication impact, which I didn't put as one of the pillars in my title, but I do feel that it is very, very important. It's becoming more and more important and pressuring on us. So I may say that in recent years, we scholars have found ourselves under increased pressure to demonstrate impact, to communicate our research, to show that our research matters beyond academic circles. And I appreciate this. This is a good thing. And of course, consequently, we give more talks as such that I'm giving now. We speak more to media outlets. We write popular science articles. We build websites. We maintain social media accounts. We try to make our work more visible, more accessible, and more relevant. And this shift, of course, also reflects a broader expectation that research should not only generate knowledge, but also contribute to change, that it should inform policy, empower communities, and shape public discourses. But this is a tricky thing. I mean, impact is a tricky concept. What does it actually mean? What do we mean when we say impact? And how do we measure the impact of our research? Long before, like in a funding application, for example, we already have to say something about the impact of our research, but like, how do we know what impact or how or the level? How do we measure it? What tools or expertise do we have to communicate our findings to the right actors and in the right language? And what is the right language anyways? Because, policy recommendations or policy notes versus academic texts these are very different languages as well. So I think in practice, we researchers often find ourselves trying to sneak into the discussions and agendas of local people, not only local people, but also stakeholders, scholars, funders, political actors, lawyers, and others. And not in a manipulative way, of course, but in a way that ensures our work is present, where decisions are being made, where it can make a difference. But this is not easy either, because one of the challenges that we keep facing is that writing, as I said, writing academic texts and writing policy recommendations are fundamentally different practices. And I believe many scholars today are trained to write academic texts and not necessarily popular science or policy recommendations. Academic writing is often quite slow, nuanced, theory-driven. It values complexity, critique, and methodological transparency. Policy writing, on the other hand, demands clarity, conciseness, and actionable insights. It often requires us to simplify, to prioritize, and to speak in terms that resonate with decision makers. But the problem with communication and impact, I would say, is that we scholars are increasingly expected to do both. Both write good academic papers, publish or perish, but also communicate your findings, disseminate, have an impact, impact on policy making and decision making and so on. And, to publish peer-reviewed articles and also produce policy brief, to engage in theoretical debates and also offer practical solutions. And this dual expectation can be intellectually stimulating, but it can also be quite exhausting and disorienting. And in navigating these demands, we also learn something really important, which is we still need to be able to say what we want to say, what we find, which is not always nice to hear for everyone, right? So we need to be clear about our message, our values, our goals, our research findings, whether we are writing for academic audiences or policy actors. We must also find ways to communicate our core insights without losing integrity or depth of our analysis. This means developing a voice, a new kind of voice that is both critical and constructive. It means learning to translate, not dilute, but translate our research. And it means being intentional about how we position ourselves in public debates. Yeah, so this is a real challenge, I must say. This is, again, I realize under communication and impact, I use the word challenge a lot, but this is a real challenge. And I think this is one of the challenges that many of us are still learning to navigate. The expectations placed on researchers today are high, and we're asked to be rigorous and reflective, but also clear and persuasive. We're expected to contribute to theoretical debates, and also to policy. So this is a very difficult balancing act. Okay. So, and after all, maybe we can say that without the context of conflict-affected regions and environmental research, impact is not just about academic citations or media visibility. It's about making a tangible difference. And how do we do that is a question that we keep asking to ourselves. It means that we need to keep in mind that each of these groups that we're engaging with are different. And, for example, a policy maker may need concise, actionable recommendations, almost given in an elevator pitch. This is what the message is, do this, like in a very short text. For a community leader, they may prefer visual materials or storytelling or education or capacity building, for example. A journalist may look for compelling narratives, or a funder or a donor may want evidence of long-term change. So we are operating in this circle that is quite mixed in terms of the expectations and the desires and expectations. And this means that we also have to be strategic and empathetic in how we communicate. So we must ask what matters to this audience, to this particular audience. What format will resonate with them? What barriers to understanding or access might exist for these people? So I realized that I managed to speak for 30 minutes without really going into anything about my own research and like my research area and topic and so on. But it has been a reflection of the broader questions, dilemmas, and practices that shape my research. Things that I constantly think about, that I discuss with colleagues and try to navigate in my work. And these reflections are not abstract, obviously. They stem from real challenges and experiences in the field. So now maybe I can share a bit more concretely about the latest project that I'm currently leading. It's called Ecotheria, Exploring Conflict Environment Interactions for Sustainable Development and Conservation. And this is a project funded by the Middle East in the Contemporary World, UNU-INWEH Strategic Research Area at the Center for Advanced Middle Eastern Studies, where I'm based in Sweden. And we are an interdisciplinary team in this project, me coming from the political science department, but others from human geography, division of risk management and societal safety, Department of Physical Geography and Ecosystem Science, Center for Environmental and Climate Science, and also Raoul Wallenberg Institute. So as you can see, we have several hats. And so mainly our research is guided by these two questions. The core research question is how do internal conflict and cross-border hostilities impact North and East Syria, also known as Rojava, both politically and environmentally. So what is the conflict and environment nexus in the North and East Syria? And how could regional, national, and international actors in post-conflict Syria play a role in contributing to sustainable development and democratization in the region? And of course, these questions, I mean, when we applied for this funding with this project, there was no post-conflict in the horizon in Syria. And then in the least expected time it came. So now we are really in a context where our research can actually have some sort of impact, or at least it can try to find a place in the negotiations on the tables where they are talking about Syria's future. So we're very particularly happy about that possibility and opportunity. And our research methods explore these questions through interdisciplinary methods. As I said, we do content analysis. We also did an extensive survey with farmers in the north and east of Syria. With the content analysis, we have done document analysis of the existing academic literature and also media articles appearing in journals. And we are also using satellite imagery, and we analyze remote sensing and satellite imagery such as land use, land cover, tree crops, and so on. And we will still do a bit of more key informant interviews to understand more. But so if we go back to what I have been talking about in terms of collaboration with civil society actors and the challenges of traveling and being on the field. So in Sweden, we are strongly advised against visiting or traveling to Syria for research. So although we were very, very lucky to have fieldwork funding to be there to do our own research, we cannot we couldn't so far travel to Syria. And so we decided that we wanted to work closely with a local partner organization, and this collaboration has been essential for the data collection, particularly in the surveys. It gave us a contextual understanding. It also made us feel better about doing counter-extractivist research and being ethically engaged with the people on the ground. And so far, we have organized 2 workshops with this project. The latest one took place about a month ago, in less than a month ago, actually. And that second workshop, for example, was originally planned to be held in Syria, somewhere in Syria. And then we realized that wasn't possible. We hoped that maybe we could do it in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and hoping that people from Syria would at least be then able to come there to be with us in person. And that wasn't possible, we quickly realized. So then we ended up doing the workshop where we invited over 30 participants representing different civil society organizations, academia, media, and activists in Lund. But what we ended up doing was we turned the event into a hybrid event so that people who couldn't travel from Syria could join us online. And we held the workshop in 3 languages, in Kurdish, Arabic, and English. So what we did there to address everything that I have been talking about, obviously, was that we shared some of our preliminary findings in the Eco-Syria project. And we shared, for example, what we have heard from the farmers that we have spoken to in the survey when we asked them about, if they wanted to share anything with us, if they had any questions to us about this research or about its findings. So some of the things that we shared with our participants coming from the farmers themselves were, would there be direct support, such as seeds, fertilizers, solar energy, or institutional help for agricultural projects and families? Another respondent said, would the survey results influence agricultural policies and reach decision makers? Someone asked, would there be advocacy for better crop pricing and farmer protection? Another question was, what about sustainable agriculture, organic methods, and modern irrigation techniques, and awareness around pesticide use and crop rotation? And finally, last example that I shared with the participants was, how can water consumption be rationalized and water resource management improved? So as we can see, farmers who are on the ground, civil society activists and workers, and us scholars and journalists and activists, and we are all trying to tackle a really complex issue that has to do with both conflict and environments. And of course, we're always missing out certain elements. And these questions not only reflect the urgency of the issues, but also the expectations placed on research to be relevant, to be responsive, and to be impactful. So what we have done in the latest workshop that we organized here, we co-developed a policy recommendation document. We have spent about 2 hours coming up with ideas about what could be done, how could the negotiation table between different actors in determining the future of Syria could be maybe informed with research findings. And of course, Eco-Syria, and then that will be hopefully finalized very soon, and then we will again work to translate it into Arabic and Kurdish so that we can reach to wider audiences. And then of course we constantly have to think about how to make that even simpler and shorter, and how to support other people on the ground as well. So obviously I'm not going through everything that we're doing, but I might just say that Eco-Syria, of course, is just one example of how we try to make research more meaningful or grounded and connected to the realities of those who are most affected by conflict and environmental degradation. And we do our best to implement or to apply these principles I've been discussing: collaboration, ethics, interdisciplinarity, impact, and dissemination and communication. We do it as best as we can in the project, but of course, there's always more we can do and more we hope to accomplish, of course. So what I hope to have conveyed today is that the silent casualties of conflict, whether trees, rivers, displaced communities, animals, deserve scholarly attention. And that attention must be collaborative, ethical, and interdisciplinary. And the cases I mainly focus on are in the Middle East, but this issue is for sure not isolated to the Middle East. This is just a part of a broader global pattern that we see across the globe, such as in Colombia, in Myanmar, in Sudan, in India, and in Brazil, to name a few. And these examples remind us that environmental harm in conflict zones is not just collateral damage. It is often systematic, it is definitely political, and deeply entangled with questions of justice, identity, and survival. So I've shared reflections on the broader research paths and practices that shape my work, how we collaborate, navigate ethical dilemmas, work across disciplines, and communicate our findings. And of course, these are not just theoretical concerns. They stem from lived experiences and ongoing conversations with colleagues and communities. And this talk, I can say, gave me the space. As I was preparing this, it gave me the space to reflect openly, almost as if writing in a diary. And for that, I'm really grateful. Thank you once again for the opportunity to present these thoughts with you. And I look very much forward to hearing your comments, thoughts, or questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pinch. So for sharing, let me just switch. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Dinc, for sharing such thoughtful and inspiring presentation. It's given us so much to reflect on for people, social science practitioners and also natural science practitioners sitting in the room and also online. And also it showed me so much apples with my background in sociology and political ecology of development analysis, where we put so much local attentiveness on designing our research and sampling methods, which so much grounded in semi-structured interview, unstructured structured interviews, network analysis, discourse analysis. Yeah. So now is we have the floor for Q&A questions. For people sitting in the room, you are welcome to just raise the hand and ask directly to Dr. Pinch, if not so many from online. Yes, Dean, please.
Well, thank you, Dr. Dinc, for this very insightful presentation. And actually, I had the chance to read the policy paper even and to start the translation into Arabic.
Oh yeah, you're helping us with the translation. Thank you. Shukran.
Afwan. My question is about your perspective in applying this perspective, or do you think that attention to the ecological harm in areas within the war zones where even the human rights not respected can get the attention, and is there any strategy that you would recommend to bring the attention within this context, where even I'm speaking in areas that suffer from genocide and mass destruction? Do you think that ecological harm would be one of the priorities in this area? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. I mean, I can say that there's definitely a lot of work towards putting environmental destruction on the agenda of crimes against humanity, crimes to make ecocide, for example, a part of the ecocide genocide nexus that I have also worked on and published a paper on this with a colleague recently. So there is definitely a lot of activism around making sure environmental destruction is seen as a crime against humanity, but it hasn't yet reached to the point that people acknowledge it, like it became one of the crimes. But I have been seeing more and more legislative decisions that address environmental destruction as a crime. Maybe not in the international arena yet, but in different local contexts. I think Scotland was one of the latest countries that passed something or acknowledged an environmental crime. So, but I also agree with you in the sense that attention to ecological harm in war zones are really, I mean, there's almost, I'm not a legal scholar, but there's almost a mismatch between international humanitarian law and international environmental law. And there's a misconnection between the two, whereas they should be really working together to understand how one thing cannot really be separated from the other kind of damage. But as I try to explain a bit in the presentation, this is often seen as a part of conflict. You know, when environment is being destructed during times of conflict or war, it's seen like, well, of course, because we have to prioritize the state, and to prioritize the state and to protect it from the enemies or threats, internal or external threats, we have to do whatever it takes. This is the kind of approach, and that's why some critical scholars are suggesting that we have to go beyond simple environmental peace building, and to also understand the dark sides of it, and to understand that we need a peace ecology rather, which is more bottom-up approach to understanding the interconnections between peace and environment. and to, think about also greening transitional justice that sets the structural framework of the policy brief that you are now translating kindly.
Thank you.
But there's a long road ahead, it seems, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinc. I have a follow-up question regarding your project in Echo Syria. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. So you highlighted the importance of non-extractive and reciprocal partnerships when it comes to conduct research to local communities. Can you elaborate a bit more how the use of this approach affect the outcome and ethics of your work in Syria?
Yeah, thank you for that question as well. Actually, last week we had a workshop together with several colleagues here where we talked extensively on counter-extractivist research and what we should do better and what kind of support we need to ensure that our research is counter-extractivist. And one of the things, and this is, as I said, this is a process. We also have to constantly think about what we're doing and how we're doing it and if we're doing it in the right way. At least to have the awareness to be counter-extractivist is very important. And I can say that it only improves the findings. It only improves the outcomes of the research. I really don't think that we could have done what we have done without the support of our local collaborator organization and their researchers who were on the ground for us when we couldn't go there. And also, like when we had the workshop, when we brought together people, speaking in different languages and getting more insights from them about what's happening on the ground, it was so enriching. And so, it gives, obviously, I'm not saying to sort of look down upon what we as scholars are doing, but I think it's really sort of, it would never be enough or complete without getting that feedback from the ground and to understand what is happening really on a day-to-day level, on how things are impacting people's everyday lives, how it's impacting their land, their soil, their agricultural products, and so on. So we are very happy that we're collaborating with them. We're writing a policy recommendation now with them. So we are acknowledging all contributors' help and suggestions and comments on it. We are, at least some of us in the research team, are also happy to be teaching in a newly developed master's program in political ecology in northern East Syria. So yeah, we're trying to give back as best as we can, but of course there's always room to grow and do more.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pinch. Yeah, it's really. You have another question? Yes, coming from Abrian.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. And I've also used political ecology, and I like how you applied it. And political ecology emphasizes multi-scalar approach to solving environmental problems. So, and we know that during conflicts, most of the negotiations are always at the higher scale, maybe the macro scale. How do you ensure that the voices of the local populations, like communities, are involved? And as a researcher, this is another question. As a researcher, what roles do humility and empathy play in your research?
How empathy?
What roles do humility and empathy play?
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting questions. So about the local voices and how they are heard, I think it happens through the surveys where we hear more from the farmers about their needs, their problems, their challenges, and so on. And that actually guides what we say in our findings in academic papers, but also in the policy recommendations. And how we try to make their voices heard is now when we are structuring the policy recommendations, we have added like 3 layers to each suggestion. And we said, well, one is for the negotiation, for the administration, both in Damascus and autonomous administration in North and East Syria. The second layer is for the negotiation table because they are now in dialogue with each other about Syria's future. And the third layer was civil society organizations. So we are trying to use all that information from the local voices, and we try to communicate those with different scales, the people and organizations in different scales. But of course, I think that is the tricky part about impact, or how much are we actually able to reach to that table? Will we actually manage to put this policy recommendation on that table or on the desks of the people who are sitting on that table is another question. But I think that can also be done through our collaborations, because at the end of the day, you can figure out ways to distribute it and make yourself more visible. You can at least try and hope for the best. When it comes to empathy, I realized that I didn't go that much into it, but of course, when we reflect, when I said reflexivity, I think it's a part of it, and it is also a very complex thing. I mean, I am a scholar from Turkey, and I'm not Kurdish myself, and I am working, for example, on the Kurdish areas, Kurdish-dominated areas in different parts of the Middle East, right? So, and obviously I'm empathetic, but I think it goes beyond, because in my research team, there are people from different ethnicities and national identities. So I think overall what should guide our research is some sort of, common ground around the importance of environment and people, and more than human life, and how we should protect it, not because it's in a particular region, not because it's an area dominated by a certain group of certain ethnicity or certain group of people, but because it is a part of the larger, our world, our environment, and it has so much connections with politics, with society, with history, with identity, with economy. So yeah, trying to figure that out and understand that is not that it is of course political and personal, but it's also beyond that in many ways.
Thank you.
I hope I managed to answer your question.
Thank you. Yes.
I mean,
Thank you.
maybe a more honest response is like, it's very depressing too, of course. It's not easy to be working on conflict zones when you see, constant devastation, no matter where. It is really difficult. And you kind of also feel like the empathy also comes in where you feel sort of useless sometimes, or like, you feel powerless in making the changes that you would hope to see. So that's like empathy also comes in there, where you feel quite upset many times.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinc. Yeah, I felt so much how to be trained as a social scientist, humility and empathy is like the two biggest takeaway, which we're very honored to be with. And yes, this brings us on to our science talk today. And thank you so much for sharing such a provoking presentation. And if you enjoyed the session, remember that all our previous talks are available on our website and YouTube channel. Feel free to revisit or share them with your colleagues. And we're back next week with another exciting presentation exploring new ideas at the intersection of water, environment, and health. Thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Science Talk. Have a wonderful day, Dr. Pint.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the recording has stopped. Okay.